Hello, Homo sapiens. This is Hoodoo Joe Lion Laden, and I'm doing another of my videos on Game of Thrones this evening. We're near the end, one episode left, and there's a lot of controversy over the last episode, and I want to give you my thoughts on it, and also give you my predictions for the final episode, the episode that ends it all. Now, the first thing we probably need to talk about is Dany. Dany's gone full Mad Queen, and there's a lot of people who don't like the way that turned out. I have a little bit of mixed feelings about it. The Mad Queen scenario was definitely foreshadowed. We all knew that Dany was going to do something really horrible and become an awful ruler. I think there was seeds laid for that from the very beginning. The problem is not the foreshadowing of that ultimate twist. It's that the development was a little bit rushed. And I think that's the problem that everybody's seeing, not with how things turned out on a lot of the things in this last episode and this last season in particular. It's not that it's bad plot writing, it's that the development isn't there. We've gotten used to a certain pace of how things go in the Game of Thrones series, and a lot of things seem a little rushed here at the end. I think we could have used a little bit more development of Dany breaking down. It should have probably prolonged over more episodes of the series. I get that she's all alone, a Targaryen, totally alone, with all this power but no respect, and the rejection from Jon really would play a part in that feeling alone. Missandei not being there to comfort her, and the only person that she has to turn to is Grey Worm, who seems to be on her side totally. And of course he's angry about Missandei too, and is warlike, so of course he wants nothing more than to destroy the place. But Dany's made some bad decisions in the past, and her executing the Tarlys is kind of a parallel to Stannis' fall when he burned his daughter. But you know, she's always been justified when she did something that was a little bit stern. You could say that her execution of the Tarlys is similar to Ned Stark's execution of the guy who abandoned the Night's Watch because he was legitimately scared to death of the Whites and the White Walkers that he saw. And then Varys, she executed Varys for trying to poison her. And some people may have missed that, but the little urchin that he was speaking to who works into the kitchens was definitely trying to poison Dany. That's why she reported that she couldn't get her to eat the food. Dany was too depressed to eat anything. I think that when Dany is sitting on top of the tower there with her dragon, looking dead at Cersei, and she snaps and makes this decision that she's going to burn paupers and just innocent citizens in King's Landing, it doesn't make all that much sense, because why didn't she just burn Cersei? She let Cersei escape, and there's no real reason for it. If the citizens and the paupers had cheered when Missandei got her head chopped off and Dany had seen it, that would be one thing. But not allowing them to surrender just because she's decided that she has to rule in fear. She can rule in fear without doing all those things, and she can also keep all of these soldiers she has gathered around her. She's got to know if she does something like that, Jon Snow and probably everybody else is going to turn against her. Another problem is, where did she become so much more powerful when she could have gone up behind Euron's ships and burned them all down the episode before? She has perfect battle strategy now, and she didn't have that before. Was it because she's being ruthless now? well, it would have been a lot more acceptable to burn a bunch of pirates than all of those paupers. However, I'm a big defender of the shows. I like the books better, but I realize that this is an almost impossible series to film. George basically wrote it to try to make it impossible to film because he was tired of Hollywood. And I understand the limitations. I understood that I wasn't going to get everything. I'm glad that it's heading toward the same direction at the end, but I think that not having those two last books really hurt them these last 3 seasons. They tried to cram most of Winds of Winter and all of A Dream of Spring into this one season that is only 6 episodes. And yeah, they're longer, but maybe if they had the Varys execution in one episode, and then the Daenerys going mad, and the next one we would have had some time to reflect and would have seemed like more time had passed, that she's had more time to break down because of the pace that we've gone in the previous seasons of Game of Thrones. Now, moving on to something I liked, Clegane Bowl. I've been predicting Clegane Bowl from the beginning. I've heard people say, oh, they just had to do Clegane Bowl because it was such a fan favorite prediction, and it's not really going to happen in the books. I think Vanity Fair said something like that. I totally disagree. I think that in the very first book, in the very first season, Game of Thrones, when you hear the backstory of the Hound, and then you have the unfinished fight between the Mountain and the Hound at the tournament when he saves Sir Loras and Robert Baratheon stopping it, that is a major setup that has to come to fruition. It's a perfect foreshadowing, and it's great to have the reader wondering if that's ever going to happen all through the show. But of course it is. You have to have a resolution for that kind of conflict introduced so early. And I always knew that the Hound was going to meet and kill the Mountain near the end, basically just because of that foreshadowing. And there was more foreshadowing along the way, especially in the series when the Mountain is told by the Hound, you know what's coming for you. Now, like a lot of this episode, this is kind of a creeper because, you know, I had it kind of envisioned a more over-the-top example of the Hound mastering his fear of fire, like maybe actually using one of those flaming Brotherhood without banners swords and killing him with that. The overcoming the fear of fire was much more subtle, but it was really cool once you think about it. The Mountain fighting the Hound on that tower, and right behind the Mountain you see the dragon go by and the big huge flash of fire, and the Hound does not flinch. That's a big change in his character. In the same place in King's Landing, he ran when the place caught aflame with wildfire, and now he's back in the same place overcoming that fire. It was very subtle but very powerful, I think. Doesn't matter that he's dying, he's going to end this. I thought it was excellent cinematography when Arya and the Hound were adventuring through the burning building in the face of death. And they really looked like seasoned adventurers. At the beginning of the show, the Hound was just scary. He didn't seem like a wise old adventurer, but now he's traversed the 7 kingdoms and come back to where it all began. And Arya too, they're almost like Fafford and the Grey Mouser, adventurers going through this dungeon to the ultimate boss. And I thought it was fulfilling. It is a creeper, kind of like Dany was. You know, at first you're like, holy crap, what is Dany doing? Then you realize how much it's foreshadowed and that you were expecting it. The same thing kind of went through my mind with the Hound, because I had these expectations of the Hound overcoming fire in the overtop way, and also I wanted him to have this incredibly heroic death That's what's good about George R.R. Martin, is he lets reality hit home. Well, what did the Hound's death really accomplish? He killed the Mountain, but they were already gonna die anyway. But, you know, Cersei might have not gone through that complete and total breakdown without losing both Qyburn and the Mountain. Everything was stripped from her at the end. And I think, once again, their pacing was off. They rushed things a little bit too soon with the Cersei conclusion. It should have been a little bit more drawn out, having her have her whole world collapse in this mental breakdown. She actually cried, which is something that you would might think that you never saw Cersei do. But for a lot of people, the Cersei and Jame ending was unsatisfactory too. A lot of people wanted to see Cersei, really get murdered by someone. Arya wanted to see Arya's list get fulfilled with those green eyes, the green eyes prophecy from Melisandre. Also, we have the Valonqar prophecy from the books, with the witch telling Cersei that she'll be killed by the Valonqar, which is the younger brother. So a lot of people speculated that Jame would kill her in the end, and it's a kind of a nod to that Jame, just like he wanted to, died in the arms of the woman he loved. And a somewhat prophecy, Jame had his hands around Cersei's neck right when the walls caved in. So it's almost like in a kind of sort of creepy way, the Valonqar prophecy came through. His hands were around her neck. It just wasn't to kill her. But if we had seen a little bit more of Cersei and her world breakdown, this reality when she really thought that she could never be beat, and then reality hits home at her, maybe a little bit longer scenes of that would have helped a lot with the development of that final breakout, made it more satisfying. I was expecting Jame to kill her outright. I thought that maybe he was confused or misleading Brienne and the rest of them on his journey to meet with Cersei, and it wasn't going to turn out at all like we expected. I thought that he'd end up having to kill her, or maybe planned to kill her all along when he got back, and he would ultimately redeemed. I think a lot of people thought that Jame needed to be redeemed in a stronger sort of fashion, but it didn't happen. This is really the worst thing that could have ever happened to Cersei in her mind, is to see the truth and the mortality that she has, and all of her illusions to be destroyed. I'm still expecting in the books, though, for Jame to have more of an active role in her death. For instance, I would have felt a lot more satisfied with it if Jame had have killed her out of mercy. Maybe the walls are about to crumble in, or maybe the Unsullied are about to come in and she knows she's going to be tortured by the Mad Queen, and Jame puts an end to her out of mercy and out of love, rather than as the Valonqar prophecy directly prophesies, to have him just kill her with no reason stated. I think that would have been a little bit better, maybe. But again, the directors messed up by not having enough episodes. I mean, they're doing spin-off episodes. They're filming them right now. Why not prolong this one rather than start doing 5 spin-offs? I mean, at least do the best treatment you can. They should have had one more season instead of cramming most of the Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring in the shortest season of the whole series. However, in the TV show, we don't have the benefit of what Jame's thinking, and I think that these scenes, this conclusion in the books, will have Jame's thoughts a lot more. It'll be from his perspective, and I think that we'll have a much more satisfying conclusion. It makes sense. It fits, after all. The Valonqar prophecy, kind of a disappointment, but it does kind of fit their character arcs. They came into the world alone in a womb, and they went back to the other side in the womb of the earth when earth came crumbling down around them. So it's symbolic, and it is what Jaime always wanted, to die in the arms of the one that he loved. But I gotta admit, it's somewhat unsatisfying. They rushed. The problem is rushing. Now let's go on to predictions. What's going to happen next? What's Dany going to do next? Who's going to kill her? Some people think Jon Snow's got to kill her because it fulfills the prophecy of Azor Ahai having to slay his Nissa Nissa. And a lot of people say that Arya is going to kill her. I think it's going to be Arya, actually, because of the Pale Horse. That is major symbolism that she's about to bring death to someone. Her whole storyline is talking about death. And I think that it will be Arya to do it, but with a twist. Before I get to that, let's talk about what Dany's going to do. Some people say she's heading straight for Winterfell to attack Sansa, because of course she's going to blame Sansa for all of this. She's the one that spilled her guts to Tyrion. Well, I hope not, because in an hour-and-a-half show, that's another ridiculous Hollywood timing thing, like they did when they sent Gendry back to get Dany when they were in trouble past the wall. I'm hoping that they're not going to do something even worse as far as logistics go, because there's no way they're going to get those horses up there to help Sansa and have the big climax there. Maybe Dany will try to go for Sansa, but I think that maybe if we see Sansa again, it's because she has brought an army there, because she has anticipated what's going to happen. She kind of foresaw it when she told Tyrion, and she's waiting to help in the final battle. I wouldn't be surprised if the final battle ends up at the Eyrie and we see the little sick kid again and the Moon Door, because there has been some foreshadowing of it being the most impregnable fortress in the Seven Kingdoms. And maybe they would be able to protect against the dragon there. I don't know, that's just speculation. But ultimately, I don't know where it's going to happen, but I think that we're going to have a kind of a face-off thing. It's something that I predicted. I predicted something kind of like this during that Arya and Waif fight. And I was wrong about that, but maybe I was misinterpreting the clues for something that's going to happen much later. You notice Arya's learned this awesome magical skill of becoming someone else. And the only time we've seen it is very briefly when she uses it to mimic Walder Frey. We haven't seen it this whole time. We've learned that she's got a lot of new skills. She's become an awesome warrior and all this stuff. And she even killed the Night King, but we haven't seen that power again yet. And are they just going to leave that off and not have any more of the use of this mimicking other people? Here's what I think is going to happen. We've already got the setup for Grey Worm and Jon to have a fight. Jon and Grey Worm are not going to get along. Grey Worm is going to be loyal to Dany to the end, and I think we're going to see a fight between them. I wouldn't be surprised if during this fight we're having flashes over to scenes with Arya or Dany. And at a moment when we don't know the outcome of who's going to win between Grey Worm and Jon, we'll have kind of a false confirmation that Grey Worm won. It'll be left on a cliffhanger. Is it Grey Worm or Jon who won? And it'll be looking bad for Jon. And then you'll see a couple scenes later, or maybe the next scene, Grey Worm walking up to Daenerys and telling her it's done, you know, Jon's dead. But it will actually be Arya, and Jon will be alive. And Arya will kill Dany, and that'll be the end of it. A lot of people say that Jon will abdicate the throne and go up north to join the wildlings. I think that might be a fitting end for him. I think it's kind of foreshadowed in the way he treated Ghost. Some say Bran is going to be a ruler. I don't know about that. Maybe there won't be a ruler at all in this new government that is born out of all this stuff. After all, Daenerys said she was going to break the wheel, and she did. Not maybe in the way she anticipated, but maybe she has. I think that Arya's character is very much like the Taoist tradition of the Wandering Monk. And that was popularized somewhat in the 80s and the 70s with the shows, the karate shows, and also the Incredible Hulk, this contemplative, meditating guy walking into town, solving all the problems, and then walking back off. And George has expressed a desire to maybe do some short stories of Arya when she's an adult. So I could totally see this with Arya after she's done all this stuff in Westeros and saved the day. She says she's always wanted to see what was west of Westeros. And maybe we will see some short stories from George Martin at some time of Arya walking into town, saving the day, and then humbly walking off into the distance, just like those old Dawa stories and also the Wild West stories that were based off of them. I'm surprised this hasn't been discussed in the community very much, but Arya has a lot of parallels and symbolism with Buddhist and Taoist philosophy, and even her name is a Buddhist and Hindu reference to basically an enlightened one. And her study goes very much in a path like the esoteric traditions, the way, even though it's disguised in fantasy talk. And I'm going to be doing a video very soon discussing this. I've already done a thread on Twitter that got a lot of reaction. And very soon I'll be putting up an Arya video, and it'll also talk about all the other symbolism that has to do with Buddhist and Taoist tradition and the idea of enlightenment. The reason I know that this stuff is in George Martin's work is not only because it's in his other works, and not only because he uses names that make it obvious, but also because he's a big Grateful Dead fan, and Grateful Dead's lyrics are just full of this stuff from the writer who is named Robert Hunter. And you can see a lot of that influence in all of George Martin's works as well as many of his interviews. And I'm going to talk about that in depth in our next video on the Game of Thrones list. Those are my thoughts for the grand finale of the last season of Game of Thrones. And if you like some of the analysis you heard tonight, please check out my Is Game of Thrones prehistoric fiction videos. I think that's the best work I've done on the subject, and you'll find a lot of cool things that you might not find anywhere else about George Martin's thinking process and some of the symbolism he uses in Game of Thrones. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, click the alarm so I can keep you updated. I upload a new video once every week or two. We'll be doing a lot of analysis on the books when they come out, the sideshows, as well as other science fiction and fantasy shows and novels. Now, if you're looking for something to read while you wait for Winds of Winter to come out, might I suggest my own latest fantasy fiction novelette called The Unnamed Bear's Favor. It's influenced heavily by George Martin, but it's set in the Neolithic period, something I've been studying for about 30 years now. This is fantasy with scientific proof, because magical beasts and strange powers really did exist 10,000 years ago.